This 1999 cult classic movie caused a popular chain restaurant to change their dress policy. That story more next on Retroflix. Welcome to Retroflix. If you like reminiscing about TV and movie of yesteryear, this is your channel. I first want to apologize for the shadows, and if you see any glare in my eyes where I shoot my videos. We're having a huge storm today, so it's pitch black out in the middle of the day, and so my lighting is kind of off here from what I usually use, and I usually don't have to do this, but so I apologize for the state of the video here today because of that. Today's featured movie is a part of pop culture in this country. It might even be in other countries as well too, but certainly here. And it has been for the last 24 years, and even will be in the future. I can't see that ever not happening, that this isn't a part of our culture for years down the line. And it is a movie that deals with the workplace. And we watch this movie, who of us can't watch this movie and look at whether it be co-workers or actions or the work itself and say, oh yes, I've had to deal with that as well in my work experiences. No doubt about that on a daily basis. And the movie that we're talking about and we're going to do today is the cult classic Office Space. Office Space is a satire of work life. It is set obviously in the 1990s. This movie was 1999, so right at the end of the 90s into the 2000s. It focuses on a handful of employees who are disgruntled at a software company called Initech. And they're just really bored with their jobs and the work life and the 9-to-5 type of work, and see there's got to be something better out there. And so it kind of deals with this in that movie. Office Space was born out of the animated series Milton, created by Mike Judge. And Mike Judge was the creator, writer, and director of Office Space. The inspiration came from when Judge worked in a temp job where he was alphabetizing purchase orders, and also when he worked as an engineer, as a temp engineer for a few months. And he did these in the San Francisco Bay Area in Silicon Valley in the 1980s. Judge said, quote, just in the heart of Silicon Valley and in the middle of that overachiever yuppie type. It was just awful, end of quote. 20th Century Fox wanted to create a film out of the Milton character, out of his Milton series, and that character Milton, which had been based on a co-worker of Judge's in the Silicon Valley who had threatened to quit if the company moved his desk one more time. And Judge suggested, though, that they make this an ensemble cast of a film. Instead of just a film on Milton, let's make an ensemble cast type of film, which is what they ended up doing. Now, of course, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but the Milton character would then be put in the movie by Judge. Also, not only is Milton based on a real person that Judge dealt with, but he also had another person that he had in his life at one point, and that was his neighbor. And his neighbor was a mechanic, and Judge said basically that he was a mechanic and had a lot of free time, made a lot of money, just seemed to be very content in life, which was the opposite of what Judge was at that time. Judge could barely pay his rent. He was very dissatisfied with his career, didn't know where it was going. And so he was kind of jealous of this neighbor of his. And he put this guy in his movie as well, which will then be the Lawrence character that will be Peter's neighbor in the movie. The setting was inspired by a trend that Judge was noticing in the United States at the time. Judge said, and I quote, "It seems like every city now has these identical office parks with identical adjoining chain restaurants." Now, casting, that was a little bit difficult for Judge at first. He only had one character that he actually wrote for a person he had in mind, and that was the character of Michael Bolton he wrote with David Herman in mind. David Herman was, at the time, enforcing himself off of Mad TV, if you remember that. He was on there for a time. And so this role of Michael Bolton is a fellow programmer who has a lot of problems with the printer and doesn't like his name either. He takes a lot of harassment for that, so he's frustrated about being named Michael Bolton. And he's obviously one of the disgruntled employees. The next person is Peter, who is kind of the leader of the disgruntled employees, and he was going to be played by Ron Livingston. They were on their way to audition Matt Damon for this role when Ron Livingston's agent called up and said, could he audition? And when he auditioned, Judge was like, I don't want to see anybody else. This guy has Peter written all over him. Next is Jennifer Aniston. She's going to play Joanna in this, and Joanna's going to be a waitress at a restaurant called Tchotchke's, which is like a chain restaurant. I think it's fictitious. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of a Tchotchke's, so I think it's kind of fictitious chain restaurant made up for the movie. If anybody else knows if Tchotchke's is real, please comment below. She plays the waitress there, and Peter's then love interest. And Jennifer Aniston was the good actor for this because they wanted to get a name actor on this. David Herman really didn't have that. Ron Livingston didn't have that. But Jennifer Aniston really did because of Friends. Now, she was having a hard time getting film roles, but obviously because of Friends, she did have that name, and so she was cast in this role. Gary Cole was cast as Bill Lumberg, which will be the boss. And Bill Lumberg, Judge said when Gary Cole read for this role that he made it 10 times funnier. And then, of course, you had Stephen Root, who will be Milton Wadhams, and that's the character we told of earlier that was based off of this, the animated series Milton. And a Judge put this character in this movie. Stephen Root is going to play him. Stephen Root played in movies like Crocodile Dundee and Ghost, and at the time he was in the sitcom News Radio, which was just ending its run. Production design. Judge wanted Initech to look oppressive. The cubicle environment, the gray walls, the gray cubicles, and he wanted that to look like that type of place, a place that just is very oppressive to people, that when you come in, you are going to be like, oh, I'm at work, ugh. And he also wanted the cubicles to have high walls in them, and that way when Lumberg would come around to the employees, he would have to lean over to see them, and also too the employees wouldn't be able to see him coming either, so they'd have to get up and look around or look to see if Lumberg was coming. They also wanted to make the working environment, as far as the actions that they had to do, as realistic as possible. There was something called a TPS report in there, and they wanted to make those look as real as possible. The TPS in the movie stood for Test Program Set, but TPS reports are quality control reports that I don't know if they still use them, but the software industry would use as well. So they wanted to make those as realistic as possible too. And you have to talk about the stapler that Milton Wadhams would have, and he was just very territorial about a stapler. You don't touch his stapler that he had in his desk, and he painted that red. And Stephen Root actually, when he was playing Milton, had these really big Coke bottle type glasses, like the lenses are really thick. He had to actually wear contact lenses. He had to wear contact lenses underneath even to see through that, and even that didn't help him. So he said thankfully they had it painted, the stapler painted red, because he had to practice reaching for it because he couldn't see it very well on his desk. When this movie was released, the studio made a poster for the movie, and Judge hated the poster. Absolutely hated it. Judge said, and I quote, "People were like, what is this? A big bird? A mummy? A beekeeper? And the tagline, work sucks? It looks like an Office Depot ad. I just hated it. I hated the trailer too, and the TV ads especially. And what the poster was an office worker, which actually it was Milton, and he had Post-its all over him, so it made him look like this big yellow thing, you know. And so the studio then ended up putting a man for promotional piece for the movie. They ended up putting a man in a plexiglass office in Times Square, and this was just, you know, the internet doesn't, you know, 99. So the internet is, obviously it's out there, and a lot of it's dial-up and AOL and that sort of thing at this point even still, but they actually had him in this plexiglass office, and it was streamed live on the internet at that time. And he was taking calls and emails from disgruntled workers. And Ron Livingston went over as a promotional piece and found out that the reporters wanted to talk to this guy in the office, plexiglass office, more than they wanted to talk to him. And he was like, "Oh, this isn't good. This isn't going to be good for the movie if that's going to be the case." The movie came out on February 19th, 1999, and pretty much was out of theaters by the end of March. So it didn't do very well. It only made about $2 million profit. It was a $10 million budget and $12 million in the theater. So it wasn't successful at all. It wasn't until a little bit later that Judge started to see that, wait, this isn't unnoticed though. He started to get a call from Jim Carrey. He got a call from Chris Rock. He got a call from Madonna, who said they loved the movie. And so he started to think, well, something's going on here. And then he started to go to like places like coffee shops, like Starbucks. He went to a Starbucks once and heard people talking back and forth and reciting lines of Office Space. And he was like, something's going on here. Well, what ended up happening was Comedy Central then in August of 2001 started airing this movie pretty frequently on the channel, and people started to watch it and started to love it, and it started to get a cult following from that. And then the people were buying the videotape, buying the DVDs when they came. So it started to make a lot of money after that, and it started to become really a cult classic after that. And then Judge really got his just desserts because he really thought this was a great movie, and the studio kind of put him down. And so this really, you know, it's really made him feel proud about that because he had moved on at that point, thinking, oh, this was just a bust. But you know, Comedy Central is really credited with that. Even the actors in the movie credit Comedy Central starting to air that movie with it becoming what it ended up becoming. So what is the legacy of this movie? TGI Fridays, the restaurant chain, which Tchotchke's is based off of for the most part, discontinued their policy of their employees or waitstaff wearing flare, the buttons on their suspenders, which in the movie it was called flare. And they discontinued that because people kept making jokes about the flare on the employees, and then so they decided to get rid of that. So this movie actually had a big restaurant chain change policy that they had for years. There are also elements of this, like for instance the TPS report, which would then basically be equated to mindless paperwork. PC load letter, which is the error message that Michael Bolton would get in the printer that would always make him so mad. That would end up being basically that would be equating to, you know, vague messages that you get on a computer or specifically a printer. Then people would say, oh, PC load letter, you know, and that sort of thing is put in the lexicon of our culture. The swingline stapler, the red swingline stapler. You know, and you look at the GIFs and the memes and so forth that people can send on phones. How much your Office Space on that? And the video game, there actually was a video game called Office Space Idle Profit that was on Android and Apple back in 2017. Unfortunately, it just was discontinued last year, I think. But you can see that even in 1999 up to 2017, then there was a video game that was made for phones for it, so its impact was just phenomenal, and will continue to have a phenomenal impact on our society as long as we have workplaces. Again, we've changed, our workplace changed over the last few years because of now working remotely is happening so much more. But still, there are still a lot of people that are going back into offices, but you still have even remotely, you still have an interaction with people, and can maybe have some things that office space had even in a remote position. So if any of you have that, if any of you have, obviously if you're going back into an office environment, please comment below. If you're remote, do you have anything remote that in your job, even though you're working remote, is there anything that's kind of the same as office space still, particularly with the people you work with and so forth like that? Please comment below and tell us about that. If you have never seen this movie before, I implore you to watch this video. It is just, it's a movie. It is great. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you have a subscription to HBO Max or Spectrum, you can watch it there right now. It also could be rented on Vudu and Amazon Prime. I really enjoy doing these videos with you. If you could please like and subscribe, it would really help the channel. And until next time, that's a wrap.